Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's Thursday, but it's actually our Thursday, Friday live chat with Marcia. So tune in with us in 25 seconds or less, and we will be live with Marcia and John for our Friday live chat on Thursday. See you then. All right, and let's bring to the stage my lovely wife, Marcia Keith. Hi, Marcia.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday on Thursday.
Happy Friday on Thursday, indeed. Yeah, we got to take tomorrow off for some personal stuff. So, yeah, let's go ahead and chat today. And welcome to everyone. Glad to have you. Whether you're in the comments, we're glad to have your chat or your comments or questions for us, or we're glad to have you here if you just want to sit back and listen. We are now broadcasting on both of our YouTube channels, as well as on X, Facebook, and what else? Rumble, our main channel, of course.
So you're on both the YouTube channels. We have to be very, very careful.
Very, very careful indeed.
Yes, indeed.
We should get Baba Wawa to do our
There
voiceovers.
you go. Or Bugs Bunny, either one. Hard to tell them apart.
Well, anyway, it's our weekly wrap up, and I guess this week the big thing has been treason. Right? Is Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard are using the treason word against President Biden, President Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the people associated with him in the Biden they don't want to say Biden because it's like picking on somebody who's incompetent.
Well, it's never stopped Trump before. It's almost everything he does. He has to take a dig at Biden. Not quite sure why he doesn't understand he already won the election, but.
Well, a lot of people that don't understand that he won the election.
That's right. That's a good point.
Yeah, but no, I mean, if the trouble with using the treason word is that the Constitution of the United States, yay, our Constitution, says in Article 3, Section 3 that it's a very, very strict requirement to meet to say treason. Let's see. I had that up a moment ago. Article 3, Section 3, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them. Notice they say them in the archaic form of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. So, the one thing that's interesting about treason to me, as opposed to other crimes, is that death is a penalty for treason.
Right.
And I'm just my thing is undo the coup, though, because what
Absolutely.
the treason was in 1963, which overthrew the government by violent acts, and the treason continues. And I like the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is using the word continuing coup. A continuing coup they're saying has been going on since the Obama administration. Well, that's good that the people will understand that there is such a thing as a coup that continues. It doesn't just, snap your fingers and now you got a new government. No, the point that I think is so important for people to see is that the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, uh, all of the founding fathers' ideals that are constituted in this country are overthrown as well. It's not just the one person, it's the whole system of government. And what's going on behind the scenes now that we can't see, I think has been very aptly described by Anton Chaikin this morning in his article.
Yes.
Which I posted on my Facebook, which is we are being ruled by criminals. We've been being ruled by criminals for quite some time. And, like the book about Frank Church by James Risen that I was just reading last week, he called him the last honest man. The last honest man. 77 or so that he did the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And they dug and dug and dug a lot of stuff, but they didn't get into, the part that would really turn over the apple cart for this coup. Now I think there's a lot of people that are digging well enough into it. I've mentioned a number of times James Manning and his show called Patriotism Unhinged on YouTube.
Right.
I'm also very encouraged by the work by a person who goes by Eyes Wide Open on YouTube, which I've just started watching his series on Charles Willoughby. And I've always been fascinated by Charles Willoughby because if you run into his name, it's in connection with Douglas MacArthur, because he was the intelligence chief for Douglas MacArthur all during the Second World War and the Korean War. And MacArthur famously called him my little fascist.
Oh, my.
And so you can kind of laugh it off and say, oh, yeah, he probably was a fascist, but so what, Well, so what is that, he's like Mussolini, he's a real fascist. He's not just doesn't just play one on TV. And so he's a very, very racist man. The idea that the people that are elite because they are the best. And, the other people that are not in the elite class, well, they're not there because they're not the best. And so therefore, those other people are kind of subjects of the elites that can be moved around, and boy, are they moving them around now with, migration everywhere, forced migration, But also you can just treat them like cattle, like the Israelis are doing to the Palestinian people. They're just treating them like, oh, these are too many animals. We're going to get rid of them.
Right.
And we as human beings are not used to seeing that, and especially not in America, where we think we have still got the framework of a free country. But as Anton Chaikin points out, we don't have it anymore.
Indeed.
It's gone. And the only way we can get it back is to dig deeper and deeper into the story behind the Kennedy assassination.
Well, and I think that this is the kind of rhetoric that we're starting to hear coming out of the administration is the first time ever that we have had officials acknowledging that our government isn't or has not been, and I think has not been is actually the correct verb, functioning the way we thought it was.
What do you think about Tulsi Gabbard? Do you think she has the gravitas and the ability to lead this charge?
That's a tough one. I think most Trump officials are seen as mouthpieces for Trump, but I think that perspective comes from the places where I'm getting a lot of my news. But no, I don't think she does.
You're saying you still reading the Washington Post?
I am. Yeah. Yeah, I do read the Washington Post. I mean, give me an alternative that gets me the mix of news that I want, because I want local as well. I want to know what's going on in the Washington, D.C. area, because this is where we live. and so it's somewhat local news. So yeah,
No,
I am.
I'm glad you do. But I don't, obviously.
It's
And
also interesting to me to recognize that how the news gets reported or doesn't get reported. Because I do look at other things as well.
Mhm.
I do see the things that don't get into the Washington Post or the Washington Post doesn't talk about. So, yeah, leave me alone about that. But anyway, I'm not sure that any Trump officials have the gravitas to lead any charge. I do feel that very often they are coming across as being puppets for Trump.
Mhm. And no, I was just kidding you earlier. I hope you realize that.
Yes.
I'm not really teasing you, because it's our local paper, and I grew up reading the Washington Post, but I got disgusted of it with Bezos and all of the reporting on, J6, but also Russiagate.
Hmm.
And Russiagate now is being unpacked, and I don't see, I don't see the news feed that you do, but it looks to me like it's all going to be partisan again. That
Of course, everything is.
Yeah.
We are now in a situation where we really have two different governments that are trying to work together and, doing a terrible job of it because there is no bipartisan anything. It's embarrassing how all the votes go with the two parties voting along party lines. It's just very, very frustrating. Because the split is so even right now, almost, it's difficult to get anything done. Yeah.
Plus, the big money in both parties are supporting the same things.
It's the same big money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where the criminal activity comes in, is that,
Right.
it's all about money.
Right.
It's, when you go back to all the studies we do about how this goes back to Britain and the British intelligence services in the 19th century, and but Adam Smith,
Hmm.
who wrote the famous book, The Wealth of Nations, and his basic idea was that if you create a system in which everyone can see a way to advance themselves, to act in their own self-interest through using the currency, the money system, then a system can grow in which everyone gets a piece, gets a part of it. But the problem is that they never wanted that to happen. They all wanted the money to just keep flowing up into the upper reaches of the aristocracy and the royalty and, of course, the bank,
Right.
the bankers. So, it sounded good, but what it really meant was all the people invested in the British East India Company are going to get rich, and anybody that's getting exploited by the British East India Company is going to get really, really poor and may easily find themselves waking up dead because they can't survive.
Right. Well, I think that a lot of deregulation happened in the late 20th century. There were regulations that prevented entities from getting too strong or too powerful or too wealthy. And so much of that deregulation that really, I think, started maybe in the 80s with Reagan
Mm-hmm.
has led to this mass accumulation of wealth and the upper reaches of society like never before. I think there was more opportunity in the early 20th century before they figured out, oh, we can change all these rules and make it easier for us to get rich. And then, of course, the propaganda machine. You know, I think that there's been so much propaganda that has misdirected attention or directed attention away from what they're doing, from the criminal activity, and forced us to blame each other and to fight each other. You know, I read a quote somewhere a long, long time ago that said, I'm from the um, upper class, and I'm here to get the middle class to blame the lower class for all their problems. And that's it. I mean, they have gotten the middle class to blame the lower class for all their problems, and they're continuing to do that so that we don't recognize how much of our challenges, and I'm not going to say problems, I'm going to say our challenges or lack of opportunities now have become the result of what they do and not what the lower classes are doing.
You know, I think that's really profound, and the first subject that comes to my mind when you say that is racism.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, as we were reading in the book that I'm now enmeshed in, The Two World Wars and Hitler by Jerry McGregor and John O'Dowd, that I've referred to on the show a number of times already, I think, you know, it says it very clearly there that the empire that has amassed all of the wealth of, you know, ancient empires into the city of London and the oligarchical families that run the banks has concentrated so much wealth that it can you know, has kind of financed everything so that it has its tentacles in every single aspect of American society.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, from financing the railroads but also look at big pharma now and all of the money that goes into it. Now, what I saw today earlier this morning was that they're trying to get some regulation changed so that our 401k plans can be invested in general private equity funds, which is where a lot of the bad money is, the unsaleable derivatives that are stuck in places like Harvard, in places like Yale that have created these endowment funds, but then they invest it and they're saying, "Oh, our investments are not paying us enough money. We need to bring in more capital." So they're going to bring in, you know, just basically the banks that operate our retirement funds are now going to be able to pay off bad debts by bringing in our 401k into their portfolio.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound safe.
No. And I mention it just because I'm not an expert in that stuff, but
Me either.
there's a lot of people out there that are, and it needs to be brought to the attention
Wow.
of you know, those of us that are hoping to live on our retirement in retirement,
Right.
as opposed to begging.
That's right. Or busking.
Busking is almost the same as begging.
I
hate
know.
to tell you.
I know that.
Yeah. Well, let's see what everybody's talking about in the chat room.
Well, I'm going to jump in here where we were talking before going further back. Class war was turned into a race war by Dems during Biden's campaign, says Brightmore Dinosaur.
Yeah, I think it's been a race. You know, it's been a race war a lot
Trying to
longer
think
than
that
that.
one through. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot longer than that. I mean, going back into the 50s, you know, the people behind the Republican Party in the 50s were racist. Generally speaking, the Eisenhower administration, totally run by Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles and people associated with them. These people are racist.
Well, everybody was racist up until a certain point. I mean, there were racist regulations and segregation that was on the books, and it was okay because that was the way society was.
Yeah. And even though the Supreme Court might have said change, that didn't mean everybody suddenly got rid of their
Right.
prejudices.
Right.
But what the point I think we were really trying to make is that this comes from the elites. It doesn't come from the grassroots. It comes from this racism that they're complaining about. It's like excuse me for generalizing, but I think your typical liberal, Harris voter would think that racism comes from the old boy network, the farmers, the less educated,
Mm-hmm.
quote, lower class.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they think, but that's not true. It comes from the upper class,
Absolutely.
and that I think is a nut that needs to be cracked wide open.
And again, they're imposing that on everybody else by suggesting that it is things like anti-racist efforts that are hindering our progress. And that to me is a very dangerous message. But they keep telling us that, we've got to get rid of these anti-racist efforts because it's slowing us down. It's not right.
Now, what efforts are you talking about?
I guess really going all the way back to the civil rights era, that the idea that affirmative action was going to result in problems in the workplace and lack of productivity and unfair situations. I think right now the Trump administration's constant reference to getting rid of any kind of DEI programs is a little, and I say it cautiously, but I think it's a little misguided, because the fact is racism still exists. And I think that initially there were programs that were implemented in the workplace and in other places to address the fact that racism still exists. And how do we try to overcome it? And a lot of that turned into just the same affirmative action programs that were happening before, that had been already identified as illegal, but we give it a different name and do the same thing. And I think that's what the Trump administration is trying to get rid of. But the fact is, we do need to address racism. It's not that racism has not gone away. We still don't have a level playing field. And until we do, we need to be aware of that. But how do we incorporate that into our conversation? But in the meantime, in that effort to incorporate it into our conversation, we're being told that you're not going to get your job opportunity because your job is going to be given to a Black person or a woman or a brown person, whatever the heck that means. And so we're being told that our opportunities are being limited by these other efforts. And, once again, it's just, us white people being told to blame the people of color for not getting our piece of the pie.
Well, that song has been sung a long, long time.
And they're still singing it.
I don't know. If you say so. I found it very interesting to be the victim of racial discrimination myself. I thought it was a very interesting situation where I personally wanted to play a role in Shakespeare's play, Othello, because I identify with Othello, the character, and I think my dad fits into the Othello mode very well as far as what happened to him in his life.
Sure.
And so, I have admired Paul Robeson, the great singer and actor and performer that was blacklisted in the 50s and lost an awful lot of opportunities to perform because of the racism. They said it was because he was associated with communism or something like that. But uh, you know, the point is, he was to me the greatest voice of the 20th century. And me being a bass, I like to interview,
Right.
sing his stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
his famous role, his most famous role, was Othello. So our local theater company decided to put on the play Othello, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to audition for that." And so on the night of the audition, I showed up, but I knew because I had read in this advertisement that they were only casting people of color. They only wanted people of color. And I thought to myself, this is interesting. I may never ever have another opportunity to play that role ever. There it is, right in front of me. And so I decided a little mental exercise. What would Paul Robeson do? Would Paul Robeson
Right. Yes.
go?
What would Paul Robeson do? We know what that means. Go on.
So anyway, so I decided that he would go and audition. And so I did. And, the director came out after the audition and said, this role is only for colored people.
People of color.
People of color.
He or she did not say colored.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. People of color. And, I said, really? I mean, can I just put on some makeup or something? I said, nope. Only people of color. I said, wow. Now, to me, the problem is the overriding racism that comes from the Anglo-Saxon authorities, the ones that are the Eastern liberal establishment, the ones that, drive the Wall Street and all of the finances and everything else. But just because my skin is white doesn't mean that I'm an Anglo-Saxon. I'm not. My blood is Celtic. And so,
well, that's still white. That's still considered Caucasian.
It is today. It is today. But anyway, I thought it was fascinating to feel like I was just discriminated against because of the color of my skin.
Indeed.
And I would hate to have that feeling on a regular basis.
But many people do.
Yeah.
Many people go through life having that experience over and over and over again in subtle ways that people like you and I are not even aware of. Standing in line, waiting to check out at the grocery store and have the person in front of you, the woman in front of you, grab her purse and hold it a little tighter against her body. Getting on an elevator and having somebody move to the other side of the elevator to be, away from you. Anytime you make a judgment about a person simply because of external factors, whether it's because they're tall or white or short or black or fat or skinny or whatever, dressed badly, not dressed badly, there's a certain level of discrimination going on. When you assume that because, this person is, I remember years ago, I was home by myself, middle of the day, Saturday afternoon, I think it was, and there's a knock at my door, and I go look outside the window, and there's a young black man outside. Well, I had just moved to this particular neighborhood that was somewhat, actually quite mixed. Prior to that, I had never lived in a neighborhood where both black and white people lived. I had always lived in areas where neighborhoods tended to be somewhat segregated, if not by law, just by practice. So to see a young black man knocking at my door my initial reaction was to feel threatened. And I realized it. I realized it almost immediately. And then I said, oh my gosh, how racist of me. And I went and I answered the door, and it's a teenage kid selling wrapping paper to raise money for the high school marching band. And then I really felt stupid, not stupid enough to buy the wrapping paper, but I did. I felt stupid.
Oh, you should have bought it.
I should have. You're probably right.
Yeah.
But I didn't. But let's just say I did. Okay. But anyway, I think those are the kinds of things we have to be aware of. And that still goes on. And as long as that goes on, then I think that we have to recognize that this is a narrative that is being fed to us over and over again. And this goes back to these criminals, because these criminals recognize how vulnerable we are to this narrative, and they keep feeding it to us.
Well, I have to agree, because when I grew up, the schools in Maryland were segregated until 1964. And I never met a Black person until after desegregation. I mean, I might have,
Same with me.
but casually seen somebody, but that was our whole, and the neighborhood they were afraid of a Black person might buy a house and move in, which would destroy everybody's property values, because nobody would want to buy your house.
Right. Yeah. So, I remember we were actually renting a house when we lived in New Orleans, and this is in the early 70s. And when we decided to move, and my family was moving to North Carolina, the owner of the house asked my mother if she would show the house, that she was going to put the house on the market, and would she show it? And there was a really nice Black couple that wanted to buy the house. And my mother calls the owner and says, I have a buyer. And when it came out that this buyer was Black, or these buyers were Black, the owner said no.
Yeah. And, that's the ignorance from the past that was forced upon us through the people that controlled, our economy and our education system.
But look what's going on with immigration. We are deporting all of these, quote, brown immigrants. And I think that it's the same kind of thing. It is a narrative. And, of course, during his first campaign, Donald Trump called all of these Latin American immigrants murderers and rapists. And so...
No, he didn't call them all that. He just said that they were murderers and rapists among them, which is true, because they were convicted in the courts of their country. These people have been tagged and identified. So it's not entirely untrue.
It's not entirely untrue, but it was said in a way to suggest that it was in much greater numbers than what it was.
Okay.
And anyway, we are being told that these brown Latin Americans, whatever the heck that means, are bad, are dangerous. Got to get rid of them. Now, I agree, immigration should be done the proper way, but the way things are happening right now, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think that there is a tendency to imply that these people are less than. And we need to be careful, because they're going to ruin our country.
I think it's fear of mercenaries being imported for the purpose of some type of military overthrow in the United States. I think that's the fear that is really being generated, is that these people are creating, enclaves and getting arms and doing, things that...
Well, then pregnant women who are trying, or mothers who are trying to escape abusive relationships should be eliminated from that group, because they're certainly not mercenaries that are coming here to overthrow our government.
True. I'm just saying that's what the fear is.
Well, but everybody with a Spanish name is being thrown into that group.
Okay. I didn't know that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of these people who have come, I mean, there are people who are in the country now, and they have signed up for programs to try to get legal status here. But because they have yet to get it, and they're working with ICE to get legal status, but they all have to wear bracelets. They all have to wear ankle bracelets now to be...
Ankle bracelets?
Yes, they're all wearing ankle bracelets. They've all been told that they have to, if they are working with ICE to try to get status, then they have to wear ankle bracelets to be monitored.
Well, that's disgusting.
All of them.
Yeah, that's disgusting. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yes. Brightmore Dinosaur says
Yeah.
key strategies from the Frankfurt School include creating division among blacks and whites, men and women, LGBT and straight. The current heightened division among the sexes and races came to fruition. And Brightmore, if I can just add one thing, it's a little bit of a sidebar. I love your use of the semicolon. Thank you. It's not done that way very often, and more people really need to. But that's not the point.
I wanted to touch on a comment from Donald Plassic about the Articles of Confederation. I think we've gone past it.
Oh, I got it right here.
Yeah. And welcome, Piasik, Donald. Welcome to the show.
Might be Piacic.
Articles of Confederation gave us a better system than the Constitution ever could. So,
talk about that.
Yeah, I will argue vehemently on the other side.
Okay.
The trouble with the Articles of Confederation is that each of the states was on its own in terms of defense. You know, like Massachusetts had a little navy. But they couldn't build any real warships because they couldn't afford it. This is why Alexander Hamilton comes in and says we need to have a federal system that will allow us to defend the whole country, because if we didn't unite, we would have been taken down one state at a time. It would all have gone back into the empire.
Yes, good point.
And it was only by uniting and pooling assets and creating a real army, the Continental Army, and as well as the 5 frigates. If we hadn't done that, then the idea of independence was a joke. And it did look like a joke under the Articles of the Confederation. And that's why the elites of our country, if you will, decided to get together in Annapolis and do something that would protect us. Because the British were so powerful compared to any of the states themselves that without having gotten us together and with the power of money to sustain and maintain our independence, the whole country would have never existed. It would all have just have fallen right back into a bunch of little colonies for the British elites to exploit. That's my opinion.
That's such an interesting point, because I think that most people don't recognize how different our system is. We are this very big, powerful country, but we also are made up of big, powerful states. And it's interesting how our founding fathers struggled with that issue of these individual states and coming together to be a bunch of united states to create a country and a system that was unlike anything that existed before.
And of course, the tension between the North and the South was so great that it's a miracle that they came together long enough to win independence. It really is an amazing thing to think of the aristocrats of Virginia working with the merchants of Boston. Why would the aristocrats of Virginia want to leave, the great empire, which is, they could have never had their huge plantations if they hadn't been part of the empire. So why would they want to leave? Well, they did. And then once again, the Civil War comes along, and as we've seen through all of the research we've done here on the channel, that the Civil War was obviously an effort by Great Britain to take the South away from the North and return it into those plantation slave-driven economies that profit the oligarchy.
Well, Prester John noted during the Civil War, Britain built battleships for the U.S. Confederacy.
Yeah.
When the war concluded, the U.S. sued Britain for reparations and actually won.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories too, is the CSS Alabama. Roll, Alabama, roll is the old sea shanty that was written in England in support of the voyages of Raphael Sims, who grew up over here in Charles County,
In
Maryland.
Nanjemoy, yeah.
Yeah, the captain of the CSS Alabama, which destroyed hundreds of American merchant ships and won a few battles against American warships as well, ultimately losing in an a lopsided battle against USS Kearsarge over in France, where it got trapped in the port. So the point is very big, that people like Edward Mandell House's father and grandfather were working with the British to win the Confederacy's independence from the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And then people like Edward Mandell House then become the most powerful people in the country under Woodrow Wilson, who again reinstates the racism in the federal government. Basically let go all of the black people that had made their way into good positions in the federal government, just basically decided, well, they're not competent. And then that's the era of eugenics beginning as well. And that's where we're at right now. We're still in eugenics.
Well, the British tried to divide us during the Civil War, and they've been continuing to try to divide us ever since, because it strengthens their position and weakens us. And, divide and conquer. Somebody commented that earlier.
But, you mentioned earlier about how propaganda is used to keep us divided. And I think that that's what Jeffrey Epstein represents right now, is just the idea of, well, a lot of people on the MAGA side got built up for MAGA, for Trump, on the idea that he was going to uncover all the child trafficking and child raping and all of those horrible things. And now he's not going to uncover it. It was just propaganda to build up the base to vote for Trump. And now Trump's in, and he abandons that whole idea. Why? Because, well, he can't really tell, because then all of his friends would get in trouble, if not himself. I mean, he knows the people that are on the Epstein list.
Right.
And whether he feels vulnerable himself, I don't know. I would think that he's right, that the Democrats, if they had something, they would have used it by now. But everybody else on that list, these are the richest people in the world.
Well, it just goes to show you what you said earlier about how they're the same. They are the same. In some ways, they're working together because both sides are on that list. Yeah. The richest, powerful people in the world are participating in this activity, and neither side is going to reveal, is going to expose themselves and their friends.
Yeah, that's what I think somebody just said. It's all, here it is. Yeah, it's all a show.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by the propaganda is,
right.
Propaganda doesn't have to be a lie. It can just be a show that distracts us.
Good point. And I think that there's a lot of hyperbole that comes out of Trump's mouth. And, I always say things like that cautiously, because the minute you say anything bad about Trump or negative about Trump, they go, "Oh, you're a Biden fan." No, I'm not. I'm not at all. And there's a lot of good things that Trump is doing. I'm really pleased with many of his economic policies. But there's a lot of hyperbole that comes out of his mouth. And sometimes the hyperbole is simple things like, we obliterated their nuclear facilities. Okay, obliterated, it's hyperbole. We see it as hyperbole. let's don't months afterwards get into tearing down, was it obliterated or not? It was bombed. But there's other hyperbole, like, I am going to solve the Russia-Ukraine war in a day. It'll only take me a day, and I'll even do it. If I'm elected, I'll even do it before I get into office. Well, guess what? Russia and Ukraine are still at war, and he hasn't been able to solve it. And the same thing with the Epstein, that's the hyperbole that people took literally.
Yeah. And now the Democrats are taking it literally.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. It's a funny thing, that you can find points of agreement between the so-called right-wing populists and the left-wing socialists, because we all really want the good of the common people. But as long as they can keep us divided, as oh, those populists, they're racists, right? Oh, those socialists, they're communists,
right?
As long as they can keep the major groups of common people fighting with each other, as we said at the top of the show, then they win.
Well, I think that it is revealing about who these people are when you recognize that both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are mentioned many, many, many times in the Epstein documents.
And that's interesting. It maybe lead somewhere, but we need leadership to take it. And I don't think Pam Bondi's going to do it.
Well, of course not, because she answers to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And he's going to do anything he can to prevent that from coming out. Well, now, Corky says hyperbole, guilty. It's a provocateur posture. Good morning, Corky.
Yeah.
Glad you're awake now and with us.
Yeah. You're trying to stir people up. You use hyperbole.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what was the comment about Gates?
Also a reason genetic scientists and Gates were guests on that island.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Those are the powerful people who are among those elites that don't want to be exposed.
Why do they go to the island?
I'm sure that each one has their own reason, but I was listening to a story about Epstein, and when the island is mentioned, I think to myself, what kind of wealth does it take to have a private island? Because you don't just buy an island.
Yeah.
You have to put in an infrastructure. If it's your private island, then you've got to be responsible for transportation around the island, which means roads or paths. You have to get utilities there, water and electricity, and of course, internet. And that's incredible amounts of money. Where did all that money come from? I've never been clear. And that's what this story was talking about, is nobody's ever been clear where Epstein got the money.
We got it from Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ah.
Let's see, Epstein Island utilities.
Well, what do you trying?
I'm Googling Epstein Island utilities, and the first pop that comes up says Jeffrey Epstein's estate can't pay electric bills. Jeffrey Epstein's estate can't pay the electric bill, but the executors of the executors of the estate told the Superior Court of the Virgin Islands. Let's see. Anything else on that? Anyway, he's got a nice little place there, a nice little Egyptian-looking house there with a gold dome. So I'm sure he's got a nice power source buried under there somewhere.
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, how did he get the gold dome there?
Yeah. Well, he knows people. How did he get to be a math teacher at Dalton School without having a degree in math?
Right.
Because he knows people, and he's an asset.
Of course. Well, I don't think it was financial advice that he was giving all those wealthy people.
I think it's both. I think it's like I'm going to let you in on the deal of a lifetime, but first let's go to the island and relax together. And then they get into the compromise situation, and they get some kind of a tax benefit somehow. That I do believe that Epstein has some inside knowledge about how to manipulate things like a tax liability into make it go away, or put it into the Cayman Islands or something.
Could be, but maybe he said, "Hey, I have this island where you can have a lot of fun, and you can pay me all of this money to participate, and we'll call it you're paying me for financial advice."
All right, what else is on the agenda here? Zelensky drawing protests for assuming control of Naboo. Now, this to me is rich. Naboo is really an FBI project that was stuck into.
What does Naboo stand for?
It's an anti-crime unit. I don't know what it means. It's probably it's in Ukrainian. It's in the Ukrainian language. But it's an anti-crime unit that was put up during the Biden administration, if I'm not mistaken, if it doesn't go back earlier. But what it is it's a way that the FBI can do things out of the country. They do things in.
I see.
Let's see. Anyway, I remember the Naboo crime unit as being part of the whole story back when.
The National Anti-Corruption Bureau.
Okay, so it is English, yeah.
Well, not quite, but yeah.
But that's the point, is that it was created by us to help control the Zelensky regime, and now Zelensky is turning against it, and that's interesting, because that means he's distancing, taking the hooks out of his government that the United States has always had. He's rebelling against the U.S. control, and also his people are rebelling against him big time, because now they're out in the streets. And I hope that this does lead to the end of the war, if enough people get out in the streets in Ukraine to make Zelensky step down, and then they'll have an election and hopefully return what's left of the country to some type of democracy.
Yeah, they could elect a real president instead of an actor playing one on TV.
Yeah, a puppet of the elites.
That's right. Well, somebody was talking about Iran earlier, and I wanted to go back to that, but now I'm having trouble finding it. A lot of good comments.
Pastor John says there's still undocumented Irish migrants in Boston. I didn't know that. Are you seriously? We've got a lot of undocumented migrants in the country, but are the Irish still sneaking over here in boats?
Well, Prester John says they're out pushing strollers and playing in the park without a care in the world. So I'm assuming that what we're talking about is nannies, au pairs.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't see that right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
but that's I get the impression that au pairs, that's all over not just Irish. It's maybe in Boston, they prefer the Irish, but Eastern
Closer.
European au pairs used to be very, very popular. Russian, Latin American. My sister had an au pair from Peru for a while.
That's so interesting, because parents don't really care where they're from as long as they take good care of the kids.
And sometimes it's desirable. I mean, one of the reasons my sister enjoyed having an au pair from Peru is because she could speak Spanish with my nephew, and so it helped him learn to speak Spanish. And certainly in, exposing children to different cultures and different languages has enormous benefit.
I'll just give Donald one more post here. We were like Europe in the way each state was like a little country of its own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Charming. I
Yeah.
mean, if it weren't for the fact that there was this empire that wants to take all of our stuff, it would have been a nice life, to just kick back and say, oh, you do Virginia, we'll do Maryland. You guys up there in New England do your thing, and down in the South doesn't matter. You guys will deal with this slavery problem in your own time. Why should we worry about it? We don't have slaves, and just let everybody go their own way. And in a world where there's not this voracious empire that wants to eat up all of the assets on the planet, that would be nice.
Well, and that voracious empire had been established hundreds of years earlier.
Yeah.
Those little European countries had had centuries to amass their wealth and to exploit populations all over the world and right there at home.
But then, it all does fall apart in the 19th century when you realize that Britain wins, and Britain takes over France, Britain takes over takes over Italy, takes over. The only one that didn't get took over eventually was Germany and Switzerland. And, eventually they got took over too. They're, we're running them now for the empire.
Yeah, for the empire.
Yeah, but that's great. It's nice to think about all of these big things, and absolutely, I'd love to let Alabama be Alabama, and work out their. I don't need to go down there and teach them that racism is wrong. They probably know it. They just need to get rid of the system. And
right.
The other point, when you study it with Harley Schlanger and our LaRouche friends who have really studied this stuff for decades now, you realize that the real smart money was against slavery by then. They realized that they could make more money investing in industry, in cotton mills, in machinery, than they could by running a slave plantation. And so it just became a question of how do we get rid of slavery? And they turned it into a way to make money by running this war. And contrast with the British, when the British ended slavery, the British voted money to pay off the owners of the slaves for the value of the slaves.
For their economic losses.
And then they took out a huge loan from the Rothschilds, from the same Rothschilds, in order. So who pays off the loan? The whole country does.
Mm-hmm.
So if the United States, had done that, maybe we wouldn't have had to have Jim Crow. Maybe things wouldn't have been so awful for the next 150 years. But we didn't. We just left all of the people who had invested their money in slaves completely destitute, and that caused a lot of resentment, and it caused a lot of ongoing violent.
And what happened?
KKK.
What happened to the slaves?
Well,
under the British system, when they paid reparations to the slave owners.
Yeah. Well, I think generally the slaves stayed where they were. They were in islands in the Caribbean. They were in British Guiana. They were in other places I can't rattle off, but not so much in Great Britain itself. Not in the islands. So and there wasn't that many. Whereas in the United States, there was more slaves in South Carolina than there were white people.
Actually, yeah. There were. I remember even seeing here in the county, in Charles County, where we live.
Yeah.
That there were I looked back at some historical censuses, and there were many decades where that was the case here too. There were more Black people than white people.
And there's so many of them. The descendants are here, and we've still got a lot of cleaning up to do. in regard to race relations in
Yes.
Charles County.
Yes. Oh,
It-
absolutely.
it's still a big issue. But again, behind it all is the money system, and the idea of getting Americans to fight each other in a civil war in order to get rid of the slave system. All it's just so cynical when you look through look behind the narrative that we're told about, the good guys and bad guys.
Okay. Well, we are at past time.
How did we do that?
I don't know. I feel like we just got started.
Well, I guess it's time.
There was a comment, though, that I don't want to go without highlighting, and I can't find it. But because what's important to me, I want to find it because there we go. And it is again this Donald Piaczek, because I think it's a nice note to end on. We should all want the same thing, freedom. Donald, I think we do. But what that looks like and how we get there is what we can't seem to agree on.
Yeah. We shall overcome.
Mm.
We'll walk hand in hand someday. All right, guys, thanks for being with us. We will see you Monday morning right here on McDuff Live for another edition of Undo the Coup. And thanks again.
Have a great weekend.
Marcia, for joining me once again here.
Sorry we can't be here tomorrow.
At McDuff Lives. All right. Bye, everybody.